I don't know how it evolved. We were standing somewhere and there's one of the rooms, and there's no furniture. It was just literally the castle. And it was a massive room with this ceiling that seemed to go on forever. And hanging down was this crazy big chandelier, like one of those you see in the movies. Like it looked about 8-10 feet in diameter, just hanging there, but like wood, and it had candles. It wasn't like electric or anything. It was the candle one. And I was like, damn, as a kid, you always see movies like people swinging across those things. So I thought, now's my moment to shine. And I can't remember what I was standing on. I just jumped off of it and landed on the chandelier and swung across the room.
Podcasting from Boulder, Colorado. This is the Baby Got Backstory podcast, where we dive into the story behind the story of today's most inspiring storytellers, creators, and entrepreneurs. I like big backstories, and I cannot lie. I am your host, Mark Gutman.
Mike Arts here. Super honored to be introducing Cory Bayers for the 50th episode of Baby Got Backstory. I've got a long history with Cory, and I can honestly sit here today knowing I'd be on a much different path if I hadn't been lucky enough to get to work with Cory through a couple different companies he's been at. So for me, as I thought about our journey, I realized how much that I was at a kind of a pivotal point of my career in life. I was freelancing, but we hadn't started our agency yet. We were starting a family, but didn't have a family yet. Like it was this big moment in my life of, I think, stepping into a whole new level of growing up, building a business, building a family when I crossed paths with Cory. And so as I look back on that, I feel like it was, the stars aligned to have a mentor, a client, and a friend like Cory taught me so much that I think is a big part of the foundation of what we do today. So I first met Cory when we got hired. Actually, I got hired to be the snowboard team manager for Helly Hansen. Cory at that time was working for Helly in the Seattle office, heading up marketing. He got the opportunity to move over to Oslo for Helly Hansen, moved his family over there. They had their third child while in Norway. And we were constantly going back and forth and not only getting to, go over there and work with him, but I watched him raise his family in a foreign country. And I should say, while Cory was working in the US, he's a Canadian. So he was already an expat. So it was a really, really amazing time. And what I learned from Cory was that he was super calculated and organized when it came to budgets and expectations and just real clear vision of where the marketing of Helly Hansen was going. And I think sometimes that stifles creativity, but when you have someone who has creative vision and formulaic execution with budgets, that's, I think, what is so hard to find these days. We work with a lot of different clients and, some are very wild style and you go out and get stuff done. But it's rare when you find someone that sort of puts that whole package together and has a ton of fun doing it, rallies the teams around them. People are excited to go work extra hard. And then Cory's also got the other side that you kind of got to watch out for that might not come out till later night. But let's just say that Cory's liver was built and designed in Canada. And it's a powerful machine that you should just know what you're getting into. We've seen some weaker folk not survive. So yeah, just this great journey, learning from Cory, him really giving us an ability to expand the work we did with Helly, which was at the time we were launching the Public Works, our agency. It all fell into place. And I can sit here probably 15 years later knowing that it was a huge chapter of my life with so much fun and education. And I owe a ton of that to Cory. So it was cool to see him make the decision eventually to leave Helly Hansen, go to Lululemon, which was a move back to Canada. Lulu at the time was, I think a brand that so many people were envious of watching. It seemed like they were just on top of the world. And Cory had a great gig there, and his family was back in Canada. He was closer to solid quality hockey, which I know is a big part of his family's being. And but then he got this opportunity to go work with Patagonia and head up their marketing, which I think for any of us who love the outdoor industry or the outdoors or companies that take a stand and do really hard things. I mean, Patagonia is at the pinnacle. So now Cory sits in this position of, I mean, he's in a position now that's going to change the world. You know, what he does, what that company does, what his team can do. It's a profound change. So couldn't be more proud of him and thankful for the time that we got together.
So I'm here with Cory Bayers, the Vice President of Global Marketing at Patagonia. Cory, what does a Vice President of Global Marketing at Patagonia do?
That sounds pretty official. Wow, I'm all grown up.
It's about time, right?
Exactly. My mom always wanted me to grow up someday. Wow, it's a very official title. Basically, I have the great fortune of leading an amazing group of people at Patagonia in Ventura, California, and in our offices around the world, communicating with the brands up. We tell stories, I work with, creative teams, marketing teams, strategy teams, operational teams, lead books and film, basically all the brand communication, non-graphic on product, but any other PR communications, branding, marketing, advertising comes out of my team. And I work, super collaboratively with people in Ventura, the business units, with, marketers and market. So there's a lot of great collaboration. Yes, that's kind of what I do. I tell stories about a pretty amazing brand.
Wow, I mean that sounds like the job I want when I grow up. So you got it. You got it pretty good. So gonna hop right into it. Like, what's awesome about working at Patagonia? Like, why do you love it, and what's so great about it?
God, I think I said this to someone the other day. Someone asked me. They said, "What? Well, is Patagonia as real as it seems? Like, as value based? Like, is there any bullshit there? Like, what goes on?" And sincerely, everything you see, it's real. I mean, from right through the organization, from the Chouinard family, all the way through our board and our teams. The conversations are real. It's values based. It's on a mission, and it's a serious mission, and it's not just, hey, let's put a mission up there, but we're really out to sell product. It's not like that at all. We truly are in business to save our home planet. And I've never been at a place anywhere with such conviction of mission and such discipline of staying on task. I mean, Yvon and the family have charted waters over the last decades that it's just been consistent. They've learned, they've been transparent, they figured stuff out, they've led, they've done everything. So it's really, that's the best part about working here. Conversations are still as hard as they'd be at any other brand, and the work is as hard as it is at any other brand. But the purpose and the mission is real, and that's what gets me up every day. So it's cool.
Yeah, and at least for me, and I think so many people, I mean, Patagonia is the gold standard. It's the brand that I think of, that I admire the most for all the reasons that you just laid out. And I think, at least in my memory, I'm sure there were other ones, but in my memory, it was really the first purpose-driven brand. It was really the first values-driven brand where I think even as a consumer, I looked at it and I said, wow, they have my values. They believe what I believe. In addition to sort of this ability to transport me to a place of adventure and make me feel adventurous and make me feel like I'm part of the outdoors. So, I think we see that. And I work in a space now, and you might get this question all the time as well. I mean, everyone now is purpose driven. Everyone now is values driven. And I don't say that to be sort of flippant. You almost have to be, it's like, the world is expecting it, but not everybody has that same sort of success. Not everybody is able to hold to true north the way Patagonia does. So like, Like, in your opinion, like, what do you think the secret is? Or what do you think how has Patagonia been so good at that and been able to turn that into both a company that is mission and purpose driven, that's changing the world, and is a pretty good business?
Yeah, that's a meaty question. I originally thought when I interviewed at Patagonia, I sat down with Yvon Chouinard, one of the founders, and I asked him. I said, "What does success look in 5 years? Like, what do you want from me? Like, what does Patagonia look like in 5 years? How do I know if I'm succeeding in your eyes? Like, are we moving forward?" And I was sitting there with the CEO at the time, Rose, and the head of HR, Dean, and Yvon. He just kind of, in his great way, looked down at his hands and, rubbed his hands a little bit and looked down at his feet and said, "I don't know, we may be smaller." And the head of HR just went white, just pale. and I said, "That's the perfect answer." And what I mean by that is they don't really give a shit about sales. We're not numbers driven. They've had some hard years in the past, I'm sure, over the decades, and some good years, and I'm sure that'll continue. But the success for them and Patagonia in general has never solely rests on a sales figure or a growth target. Success looks like, getting more activists to sign a petition, to defend a local watershed, to change a supply chain completely on its head to organic cotton only. Those are huge success factors, regardless of a sales figure. And I'm not saying that all other brands are just looking at a sales figure, but it does give us a different frame of reference of what success looks like. And I think that's helped us weather a lot of different storms over the decades. So that mentality about truly wanting to do good and being up for that change and measuring that change has been such a central tenet to who we are that I think that's our success metric. So, yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about what's so great about Patagonia, but what's really hard about what you do there, and what don't we see? What don't we know? Like, and what do you wish, like, maybe people did know about the how hard it is or the hard part of what you're doing?
It's a bit of a double-edged sword on this one. The hardest part is, because we're seen as a leadership brand, we're held to a very high standard, which is right. And to me, this is where you get the double edge to it. We're held to a high standard, but we're also open to, like anyone else, even more so though, we've got, if we step out of line, we got a target. Like, people let us know. And that can be really hard when you're doing, making the number up, 9 out of 10 things right, or 9 out of 15 things right, and you do one thing wrong and you get hammered for it. You're like, damn, but there's all this other stuff we're doing good. Yeah, we dropped the ball on that one, but look at the goodness. But I look at it on the other side and go, you know what? It's a good way to be, though. Our community that cares and we care holds us to that standard, and that standard allows us to keep moving on and keep pushing ourselves. So while it does get hard and frustrating sometimes, it does pull us forward. It's a nice standard to be held to.
Well, now you've got me curious, because I firmly believe that we often grow through those hard times when we're challenged or when there's criticism. So can you recall a moment that kind of falls into the parameters you just described, where maybe you did a misstep or you got called out, and how that went, and how you learned from that, and then how you were able to kind of return back to that high standard through that learning moment?
Yeah. Looking at, as an example, I look at, let's see, DWR, water repellent finish on garments. We are switching to be non-fluorocarbon, so not as toxic, in that there have been other brands that have been quicker, because we look at, what are the options? So by switching from one formula to another, there's impact. And it's not a marketing play to just switch and say, hey, we're PFC free or whatever. It's okay, well, what chemistry are you using now? And what are the effects on the environment now? And because there are ramifications, and we've spent some time looking at the solves, and we don't want to jump to a solve that is just makes us look good or feel good when we know there is also an environmental impact to a lot of these options out there. So working with our supply chain, working with our partners to get that right formulation. So in some instances, we've been, criticized for going slowly, and rightfully so. And I think that's fine. But, people need to know that we really examine all solutions and we play through the impacts. And those impacts could be on the environment. Those impacts could be on performance and durability, lifetime value of the garment itself, its performance of the garment, other harmful effects. So we kind of play through everything. We're very much a measure twice, cut once mentality. And when we go, we go. But a lot of times, our communities don't see that, so we can be called out. And that's rightfully so. But sometimes it's a little hard, but it's all good. They're keeping us to that standard. But DWR is one of the examples that we're looking at right now. We are switching, and in subsequent seasons, we're going to be completely flipped, and it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to think about, when that you have to have all these considerations. And I think of Yvonne's kind of famous story about, shifting to organic cotton and things like that. and was that as that the way that story goes was just like, it was a decision, it was done, it was it was going to ruin the company, but he didn't care, and he was just going to move forward because it was the right thing to do. Is there a little hyperbole to that story? Is that the way it happened?
That's pretty much how it happened. Yeah. I mean, I think he walked in and said, "You got 18 months, figure it out." And switching to organic cotton at the time. And I'm going from story. I wasn't at Patagonia at the time because this is going back, I believe, to the early 90s. Could be 94, 96, somewhere in there. But yeah, and, taking people out to the farms and showing them the difference between employees at Patagonia in Ventura, and showing the difference between an organic farm and a chemical-based, fertilizer and run farm, and having people actually see that difference and the impact that's having. Yeah, that's fair. There's a lot of truth to that story. It's completely true. And similar with this DWR as well, we're looking at, timelines on there where we're going to be flipping it. And we had that conversation with about a lot of different things. Like, we're always pushing ourselves to a timeline. Like, okay, how quickly? What is the impact? And really want to make sure we're careful in solution, but at the same time, trying to run as quick as we can. One of the expressions I had heard, go as quick as you can, but take the time you need. And that's been, I think, really paramount in a lot of our decision making. Like, we're going to run as quick as we can, turn over every stone, do whatever we can, but make sure we're also examining the impacts and then going.
I mean, that part of that story that kind of blows my mind, that like I haven't really thought much about, and being a storyteller, and you just, shared in the opening, I mean, your whole job is being a storyteller, is this idea of bringing the employees to see the different farms and to get their buy-in. And I don't really see that very often. I think we're so consumed with external storytelling that we don't spend a ton of time on this internal kind of component. And so, like, how important is that to you in your role? I mean, are you spending a lot of time thinking about how do we sell? And sell is kind of the wrong word, but how do we show? How do we get people to see our point of view? Because when you just shared that story about going to the farms, I was like, oh my God, like, how could you work at Patagonia and not be bought into the shift, even though it seems scary, even though it seems big, if you're given that opportunity to insert yourself in the story?
Yeah, no, it's something that we can always do more of. And you're right. It's not selling to the teams. It's more, making sure they're engaged. We have a very, very incredible group of people in all of our offices that they're there for the right reason. They're hungry, they're curious, they're creative. So it doesn't take much to share the story and go, hey, this is what we're working on, to get people really, really excited, which is pretty incredible. And I'm trying to think back of, other places that it goes really quickly. Like, a story gets picked up, you're like, amazing. Okay, how do we make it happen? And people getting behind it. And there's very little having to sell someone in a meeting. Like, this is the reason why we're doing it. It's more like, hey, this is the reason why we're doing it. Here's some of the background. And you just see people light up like, oh man, that's cool. That is, oh yeah, let's do it. If anything, we're on the other side of that. as I always say, we want to solve so many problems. We do a lot, and sometimes too much, and we get underwater a little bit when it comes to either storytelling or some of the things we're taking on. We've got a lot of energy.
I can only imagine. I think maybe it'll come up later, but I shared with you my sort of thought, how I always view the decision room, the marketing room at Patagonia, and everyone's like, can we talk about something else maybe other than saving the planet or public lands or water rights or all these things. So and so thanks for sharing that, Cory. What I'd like to know is, look, you've had this amazing career, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But like when you were a young boy and growing up in Canada, were you thinking like, hey, I'm going to be in the outdoor industry, I'm going to be in marketing someday, I might work in marketing for some big, outdoor brand?
No, not at all. I mean, I grew up in Montreal and grew up in the city. Luckily, we spent summers in Vermont and upstate New York on Lake Champlain. So for all summer, basically, I'd be in a tent and a sleeping bag for months on end. And that was amazing. And I always, that was my connection to the outdoors and made me fall in love with the outdoors and the sports that I did. But it probably wasn't until college where I was an accounting major, which makes me laugh right now. And I'd gotten into skiing and snow sports. And it sounds bad, but I wanted to find a way to get to the mountains cheaper. And me and some buddies just started, ski club. And it was a way for us to we'll get a bus, we'll get a bunch of people on there. And if we get enough people, we'll get a few free tickets and then we can ride for free. We just got to work it and organize it. And we're not getting paid, but we're going to get free lift tickets. And I just kind of got into that. And we used to get, organized, try to do weeklies in the winter, like busloads of students, down to like, Jay Peak, Smuggler's Notch, Mo Sutton, all these places, and just have fun with it. And I really fell in love with the entrepreneurial side, the business side, the marketing side. And some of my friends I met not long ago, they actually joked, they're like, yeah, we weren't sure if you're going to graduate or just be a ski bum, but they're like, we're pretty impressed that you actually graduated, you stuck around. But I fell in love with call it the business of sport, or that interaction, or that blurring of the lines really between, fun, passion and sport and work. And then so right away, I think after my first semester, I switched from accounting into marketing and just, enjoyed the creative side of it and the entrepreneurial side of it, really. And so that was kind of the foray into it. And when I really started to think about, hey, this could be a place I'd love to work in. And it was like, oh, am I going to work in like, ski resort, backcountry lodge? I thought about guiding, do I go to guiding school? Do I want to do that? So there's a lot of options, but I knew I wanted to be tied to the outdoor sports and the outdoor community in some way, that I could apply my little bit of knowledge and passion to be part of the community.
Yeah. And I would think you know this, but maybe you don't. Mike Arts, who introduced you for this episode, and also connected us so that we were able to have this interview. Did you know he had an exact same sort of, like, I'll call it a racket going on, where he was putting together a ski club, selling lift tickets, like getting people to the mountain so he could go for free?
I didn't know that. And I've known Mike for years.
Exactly, almost verbatim to what you just shared. It was like, I was like, did they do that together? That sounded like almost, identical.
Although funny enough, I know he went to UVM. So yeah, we weren't that far. I was in Montreal, but no, I didn't know that story. No, that's funny.
That's how he got his start as well. So, and at that time, why don't you give us like a little sense of what the outdoor landscape looked like? I think it was a lot different than it is today.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it was definitely a lot. It was more fringe. It was more, a lot fewer brands. The space wasn't, I won't say co-opted, but it wasn't as mainstream. It was a little more isolationist, different kind of pursuit, smaller group, smaller community at the time. So yeah, it was a little different in that regard. obviously, product and technology has just exploded in terms of what's possible now. But the community was a lot smaller, and you were more on the fringe. It wasn't as mainstream to see someone. You saw someone walking in a ski jacket or a waterproof jacket or even hiking boots in the city. You either thought they were a student or a traveler or something like that, like a European traveler coming through, backpacking through. Whereas now it's very commonplace. I mean, it's part of the culture. It is a mainstream activities and pursuits. So yeah, it's grown immensely, which has had some great upside to it. I mean, it's been amazing to tie it back to Patagonia though, but something that people aren't going to protect the land unless they have an attachment to it, love it, know it, care about it, or have recreated on it. And by having more people involved in the sport, it's only going to get more people involved in defending the places we love. So it's been super positive in that regard.
Yeah, and I think at that time there was this really interesting birth of this intersection of outdoor and lifestyle, and that where people were, I think, that was about the time I was starting to see, accountants and business people wearing Patagonia clothing, around town and stuff like that. And prior to that, we didn't really see a lot of that. So at this time, you've made this decision. You're going to apply yourself. You're into marketing. You see at least the world that you want to be a part of. That it's like, hey, there's this cool thing with like being outside and being in marketing and business and being an entrepreneur. So what'd you do with that? Where'd you go from after you left school?
My girlfriend and I went and cycled around Europe for almost a year. So that was fun. Had Patagonia gear at the time, obviously. And then when we came back, we knew we wanted to live kind of in the West, the mountains. We wanted to explore the Western side of Canada and the US a lot more. And so we moved to Vancouver, and we actually used mountain bikes with slicks on them to tour. We didn't use a regular touring bike. And it was a Canadian brand called Rocky Mountain Bicycle. And when we moved back to Montreal, basically packed up the car, sold everything. Not that we had a lot, basically had skis, snowboard, and stuff, threw it on the car, and then drove out to Vancouver and, applied. We both applied for jobs, sending photos from this trip to Rocky Mountain Bicycle, the bicycle place that we had bought our bikes from. And my wife got a job there as an accountant. And I would just, hang out, mess around with the bikes. This is early 90s. So mountain biking was relatively young then, and kind of got into the sports scene, got into it with a lot of those guys. And then eventually I joined Helly Hansen. And I was doing marketing for Helly Hansen in Canada. So that was, their retail and wholesale and team and all that stuff. So out of Vancouver. So life was pretty good, actually, starting to see, how I could actually apply some of the things I learned and the passion I had to the outdoor industry. So that was, Helly Hansen was kind of my first outdoor brand that I just threw myself into and enjoyed immensely. And out of Vancouver, that was.
Yeah. And when you started with Helly Hansen, what was your role there?
I was head of marketing for Canada. So I was overseeing Canadian marketing.
And was that a big sort of territory or big deal, or was Helly maybe not that big at that time?
You know what? Helly wasn't, I guess, that huge at the time. And it was a big geographic territory, but not a massive role. It was a great role for me to, learn and figure stuff out. I always say it was big enough that I had a budget and things I could do to get in trouble. But it wasn't so small that I was like, damn, I'd like to do that. Oh, I can't do that, or I can't do this. I had enough latitude and it was of enough size, enough autonomy that I could kind of mess around, get in trouble, try some different stuff, whether it be events or ads or whatever it was, or working with athletes or in store and things like that. So I really enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot of fun. And then after that, I went to do marketing for their mountain sports division out of Seattle. So moved the family down to Seattle and enjoyed that as well, just concentrating globally. So this is a global role on mountain sports. So ski and snow and climb and hike. And that was so much fun. I loved Seattle, loved the Northwest. And the opportunity came up. They said, well, would you like to come to Norway and kind of like, market the other categories as well, like be involved in marketing for kids and footwear at the time. We've got some other categories and always the adventurous. I was like, hell yeah, I'd love to. So moved over to Oslo, Norway, and worked for Helly there, Global. That's their head office, and worked there for, I can't remember, I was there almost 4 or 5 years, I guess, in the marketing team there, and just met some amazing people, and just what a great culture and what a great country to live in, and what a great brand. And I learned, a lot of dealing with international markets and just other stuff. It was really cool. It was such a great learning curve. Heck, I'm still a student. I'm still learning every day, and I love that aspect of it. So now that I'm looking back, I'm thinking, wow, yeah, I enjoyed learning there and there and there. Yeah, so no, it was great. I had a lot of fun.
This episode brought to you by Wild Story. Wait, isn't that your company? It is. And without the generous support of Wild Story, this show would not be possible. A brand isn't a logo or a tagline or even your product. A brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. Wild Story helps progressive founders and savvy marketers build purpose-driven brands that connect their business goals with the customers they want to serve so that both the business and the customer needs are met. This results in crazy, happy, loyal customers that purchase again and again, and this is great for business. If that sounds like something you and your team might want to learn more about, reach out at www.wildstory.com, and we'd be happy to tell you more. Now back to our show. I think for a lot of marketers, a lot of people in the outdoor industry, that would have been a job of a lifetime. That would have been it. That would have been like, hey, I'm going to stay with Helly. I'm going to do, I've got it good. I've got it really good. And yet another role came your way. And did you go right from Helly Hansen to Lululemon?
I did, but the reason why I left Norway was for personal reasons. My parents are a little older, and I was on a photo shoot in northern Norway with Mark Gallup at the time, a good old photographer friend. And my parents live in British Columbia and in the interior, in a small town called Kamloops. And my dad had a heart attack, and it took me as soon as I found out I was on the shoot, it took me, 30, 40 hours to get back to British Columbia to see him. And I had kids at the time, two young girls. And I was just like, I want them to know their grandparents. I got to get home. So I went back to Norway after my dad was feeling better. And it was tough. But the guys at Helly were great. I just said, look, I got to get home. There's a time for family. As much as I love the team here and I love Norway, I gotta get back and take care of my family and let my parents, see their grandkids. Sorry. And so I went back, and they were great. And Helly was like, hey, do you want to stay on and consult for a little bit out of Vancouver, help in the transition? I'm like, I'd love to. That's great. So my thought of coming back to Vancouver was, maybe I could talk to a few brands and kind of string a bit of a marketing consulting thing together, whatever that looks like. So I moved back to Vancouver, landed on July the 2nd. So I'm hitting the pavement, talking to some old friends. And one of my buddies was like, hey, you should talk to Lululemon. And I was like, oh, the little yoga brand over on West 4th. He's like, yeah, Cory, you've been out of Canada a little while. They're a little bigger now. I said, okay. And this was 2009. And I'd been out of the country since early 2000. So not quite 9 years, but close to it. So 2009. And I approached them and said, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. Here's my background. I'd love to, see if you have anything, do you need any help? And the person there at the time was like, we don't, but we've got a brand role. Do you want to, be brand manager here? We're figuring some stuff out. And at the time, they're still relatively small and growing. And I was like, sure, this is kind of cool. Really loved everyone I met and what they stood for. And just every conversation I had, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in. So that's how, I just transitioned, by mid-August, I was like, yeah, I'm at Lulu now. So I was at Lululemon for was it almost 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. So from August '09, I started at Lulu, overseeing brand manager role, and then oversaw the creative. So head of brand creative, VP of brand creative for several years.
Yeah, and so for folks that may not know, like what is a brand manager, and maybe in the context of working at Lulu, just to make it real, and then also like head of creative, like what does that role do, and what are your responsibilities, and again maybe some of the things that we don't know, like what's tough about it.
Yeah, well, brand manager very similar to marketing manager. The difference at Lululemon between I guess a typical marketing manager role and why it was a bit more of a brand manager type role was a very decentralized model, very very interesting in that a lot of they create locally, whether it's events in their stores and stuff like that. So it wasn't typical. Hey, here's what we're doing in the month of August or whatever. This is your store window, and do that. It was more teaching them about brand, about our brand, about the Lululemon brand. What does that mean? What are our values? And having them go and create locally, which was really cool, and such a great model. And then when I was, well, before I jump to the creative side of it, you'd ask, what were some of the challenges? And one of the interesting things, Lululemon had, at least at the time, and for my tenure there, and I would think so still now, an appetite for risk. And they knew that, I'm making up, but out of 10 windows that a store would put out, one would be absolutely amazing, or two or three, whatever. They'd have absolutely amazing windows. And a bunch of them would be kind of mediocre. It is what it is. And you can't hit it out of the park every month. And then one or two would get us in trouble, meaning they'd be like, oof, that's an offensive one. Or, their media would be involved or something would get messy. You'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. But there was a tolerance for that. And it was an exciting environment to be creative within. And then I went to, after that, overseeing the creative team and working with them, another talented bunch of, designers, photographers, film. There was a bit of film and video, at Lululemon at the time. And that was a different role. That was like purely creative with a bit of a strategy to it. But the creative side of it was really guiding that, what's the look and feel of Lululemon through those years, everything from, print ads to the website to how we shoot, how we tell a story, the emails that go out. So all the creative communication at the time, I had the great fortune of working with, a great team there to bring that to life. And that was a lot of fun too. Learned a lot there.
Yeah, and the way I hear the story, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, is that you're at Lulu and you're head of creative and things are good. You're happy. You're doing your thing, and you get approached by the big white whale, right? By Patagonia. I was going to say, I was going to say Detroit Red Wings, but I think that's from my more of my memory than the reality these days. But you're approached by, the preeminent outdoor, like you said, the gold standard, high level, Patagonia. Is that the way it happened?
Yeah, it was actually interesting in that when I was still in Norway and I was looking to move back to Canada, I had reached out to a few people, like different, recruiters, like, hey, you know what, I'm heading back to Canada for family reasons. I'd love to talk with you guys about something. I got talking with this person, Deanna, at a recruiting agency. We had a great conversation. And she's like, you know what, there's nothing at Patagonia right now, but I'll definitely keep you in mind. And she was working, I think it was in Portland, with a recruiting firm. And I was just kind of getting my name out because I was coming back to the US and I'd been out of the country for quite a while and didn't think anything of it. And then went to Lulu, and literally, I guess it was probably a total of 8 years later, I get a call from her. I was like, oh, hey, Deanna, we hadn't talked in forever. I'm like, wow, great. What's going on? She's like, well, we're looking for a head of marketing. Are you interested? I remember our conversation from a few years ago. I'm like, yeah, it was 8 years ago about, just a random conversation we had. So she reached out and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with Patagonia for sure. And it just kind of started there, really. I met with Rose, CEO at the time, and some of the people here, and just loved every interaction, every conversation I had. So it was a tough decision actually to leave Vancouver, to leave Lululemon. But yeah, it's been great. It's been great, almost 5 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can imagine it was a tough decision. I mean, first of all, moving from Seattle, where you've established your home and you're loving it, and was it Seattle or Vancouver? Vancouver, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, Vancouver. Yeah, Vancouver, yeah. But yeah, you're still moving to Southern California. That's a big move, and I could sense perhaps in the question that you referenced in the beginning of the show when you asked, well, how do I know I'm successful? I mean, I would have to think it might be intimidating coming into a company that's so highly revered, and certainly at a high position. I mean, my thought is like, I wouldn't want to screw that up. I don't want to be the one that starts to put, cracks in this hull of this ship. So, I mean, were you intimidated? Was it a little scary?
I don't know if it was scary. I mean, all through the 80s, as skiing and in the outdoors, I was just so immersed in their catalogs and the imagery and the brand. And I'd read Let My People Go Surfing, that it didn't feel distant. It didn't feel like this is another entity. It felt like something I knew, something I was passionate about, something I felt close to in some weird way, because I'd been so involved or absorbing everything they had been doing for decades, really, like I said, since the 80s, that it didn't seem like such a leap. And the conversations were very real and just honest, and expectations are about saving the home planet, which I know that sounds massive, and it is massive, but I don't know. It's not something that really crossed my mind. It was, I guess, another adventure, a way to learn. And in a really weird way, it felt like kind of coming home because of they were one of the brands or the first brand I fell in love with, when I was into the outdoors or getting into it and getting into quality apparel and what spoke to me imagery wise. So yeah, it was a bit of a full circle in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're there now. You're overseeing a great team. Like, what's next for Cory?
I don't know. Keep having fun. Keep learning. Just keep growing. Really. I keep talking about learning. I'm kind of the eternal student, but there's something that I discovered a long time ago that I really like coaching. And not to jump around, but I remember like in the 90s, one of my first jobs, they actually had us do this Myers-Briggs test. And it's a personality test, right? And you go through the whole thing and answer these questions, and the report comes back. And I was, mid-20s at the time. And one of the things on there, it says, you really enjoy coaching. You'd be a great coach. And I never thought of that. Like, really, a coach? Like, when I played team sports, I never wanted to be the coach or anything like that. But I just discovered, like, okay, I want to be a coach, really? Okay. I was in my mid-20s. I kind of put it aside. And then, when I was leaving Norway, the team there, they put together this little photo book. And it was just pictures of me with them through my time there. So, like, on photo shoots, behind the scenes, on the mountain, in the cafe in Moss in Norway, at the office, or just a bunch of stuff. And the thing that just broke me was they said, "Thanks for being our coach." And I was just like shook. I was like, "Oh my God, I guess, yeah, that's what I love doing. I like that." And I hadn't thought about that for about 10 years, and that just nailed it again. And so I enjoy that aspect of being able to help coach and impart some of my knowledge and on the next generation of marketers and creatives and people that are going to change the industry way more and change the world way more than I have or will. So I do enjoy that. So I don't really look too far what's next. I kind of try to stay in the present, about keep learning on what I'm doing and keep coaching my team and keep seeing people grow. Because honestly, if you ask me what was the thing I'm most stoked about over the last 10 years, I'm not going to talk about a campaign. I'm not going to talk about creative. I'm going to talk about relationships. people I met, someone like Mike, Mike Arts, and the great work we've done. I'm going to talk about, a young designer out of school that was, I believe, an intern at the time when I joined Lululemon. On my left, she was, an art director and on her way to be a creative director, just a brilliant creative mind. Those are things I remember. I don't remember, some campaign that went out that we may have felt good about at the time. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now.
No, and it sounds like you've been such an influence to a lot of different people. Just even how you described, your involvement in coaching and your influence in, coaching the next generation of marketers. But like, who's been the most influential person in your life?
Wow, tough question. I don't know if there's been just one. I think throughout my journey, there's always been someone along the way that has really inspired me. We're talking about Mike. Mike is always inspired me with his just creativity, his drive, his sense of purpose, ability to have fun. I've looked up to Mike for a long time. I look at some ambassadors I've had the pleasure of working with. When I was at Helly, there was one gentleman, Joran Kropp, who unfortunately passed away in a climbing accident several years ago, but such an influential person, and his perspective on life and what he accomplished, was amazing. I look at right now someone like Yvon Chouinard, who's simply iconic, the real deal, learning from him and hearing his little bits of wisdom. So yeah, it's kind of a bunch of people all along the way. I've always, it hasn't been one mentor. It's been a bunch of, a series of mentors, and even if they weren't full mentors, just learning like a snippet from here or someone teaching me something, going, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I never looked at it that way. From even days at Lululemon and yoga philosophy and just exploring yoga and things like that I learned along the way from, some of the coaching we got there was incredible. See, I can't pick just one. Sorry.
It's all right. And, I think it's there's some synchronicity in that you mentioned Mike. Mike was on the podcast. So those of you listening, you've heard us reference him a couple times. You can go ahead and listen to his episode and learn more about Mike. But Mike also had sent in a question through the Baby Got Backstory sort of email channels of a question that he would like to ask you. So are you ready for it?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Let's see.
There was a time when we, as Helly Hansen, rented out a castle in Austria. It was maybe one of the best fashion shows, parties I've ever seen go down. I highly recommend renting a castle to anyone listening. Later that night, while leaving, after copious amounts of enjoying the castle, Cory pulled off a pretty amazing gymnastics stunt, and I was really hoping he'd maybe share what went down.
Oh, geez. I knew Mike would talk about something like that. It was a castle in Austria, and it's pretty crazy. It's funny. I was at a sales meeting pre-COVID in Europe, our European team there, and it was in Italy, and what they had rented out. Like, it's incredible what you can actually, buildings and areas you can do events in Europe always blow my mind. And this was a castle in Austria, and we were launching a new season. I can't even remember what season it was. And it was just a lot of fun. It was really well done. And we stayed around, a big group. We had a bunch of the skiers and snowboarders there, and just had a really good time. And I don't know how it evolved. We were standing somewhere, and there's one of the rooms, there's no furniture. It was just literally the castle. And it was a massive room with this ceiling that seemed to go on forever. And hanging down was this crazy big chandelier, like one of those you see in the movies. Like, it looked about, 8-10 feet in diameter, just hanging there, but like wood, and it had candles. It wasn't like electric or anything. It was the candle one. And I was like, damn, as a kid, you always see movies like people swinging across those things. So I thought, now's my moment to shine. And I can't remember what I was standing on. I just jumped off of it and landed on the chandelier and swung across the room. And I believe there was a couple of bottles of elixir in my goggle pockets on the inside of my jacket that fell out as well when I was swinging. And Mike liked that story. But I just swung on that thing. And after I got off, Mike was like, you do realize that thing's probably is over a couple 100 years old. You could have killed yourself. And it's like, that's the last thing I was thinking. It was, I was 6 years old again. I wanted to fly on that thing, just like you saw in the movies, man.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I am just so sad. I'm so sad that didn't have the opportunity to work in it.
I think I alluded with the other question if you get into it, but we'll see if he'll tell that one. If he won't, I have pictures. I don't think Cory holds back on much. There's I think one of our favorite ones was you talk about like in snowboarding or skiing, like overshooting the landing. Ian Foreman and Mark Gallup and I were all heading over to Cory's house in Oslo to have dinner. And he told us just to stop and pick up sushi on the way at Alex Sushi, which is like, it's the Nobu of Oslo. So really good, stupid expensive. Like you'd probably buy a small house in Kansas for what dinner costs, right? So in the snowboarding terms, if it had been a 60-foot tabletop, I'd say Cory overshot the landing on the order by 120 feet, but maybe he can tell that story of, I still kind of wonder what happened to all that sushi. Hopefully he fed the entire neighborhood. I think Cory might have taught me about the Canadian Caesar and Crown Royal. Like those are two very big staples still in my life. I think a lot of that resulted from the same trip that a game we created called Trail Ball was launched. I remember our bar tab at the end of that week at Cheddar Creek. I still have that also, but the line items are something like 196 Crown Royals, like 126 Caesars, more kokanees than like you could have floated a small tugboat in the amount of kokanees we went through. But that was an epic trip that a lot of learning and creativity came out of, and even some good photos. So that's the thing with Cory. Cory's like pretty put together. He's like one of those guys that could actually probably run for political office. He's a dark horse.
Yeah, I always struggle with the sushi orders, and I've gotten better in my old age, but I always just struggle with quantity. And these guys are coming over and they're hungry and I don't want them to starve. So I went to the restaurant during the day. I said, look, do you guys deliver? I'm not living that far, but I'd like to place an order. And do you deliver? And they're like, no, sorry, we don't deliver. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to order now. I'll pay now. And my buddies will come by in a taxi. They'll pick it up and they're going to bring it to my house. No problem. And I still remember, Mike, when I opened the door, it was him and Gallup and Ian, and they're holding the sushi. It literally looked like a pallet of it. And they're all smiling and laughing. And I'm like, what's wrong? They go, well, we got a message from the owner of the restaurant. And I'm like, oh, geez, what would I do? My card bounced? Like, what happened? He goes, no, his message to you is, here's the number you should call. What is it? You ordered like it's for an army. We will deliver anywhere for you. And here's my personal number. So I overshot the landing. I think it was something like, I don't know, $4,000 of sushi for 4 people. But it was, my wife still reminds me that to this day, whenever I order sushi, I get the look. So yeah, I really overshot the landing. I get the look. Yeah. Even my kids know the story and they give me the look too.
Well, it's serving you well. You're still telling that story today. So has there ever been a moment like at Patagonia or any time during your career where you just felt like scared or like, something wasn't going to work out the way you had hoped?
Oh yeah. What day of the week is it? Yeah. I mean, shit, a lot of times. Yeah. Because, as marketers or as creatives, whatever you're unleashing, kind of waiting for a reaction sometimes. So there's some stuff you can put out there and go, oh boy, this is going to be interesting how this one's received. And sometimes it's received well and sometimes it's not. Or yeah, there's always an element of risk or uncertainty. I mean, you do what you can. you work through it, you work with your teams, and then, but once it's into the big wide open, yeah, there's an element on a lot of campaigns or a lot of things that I've put out over the years that you're like, okay, how's it going to be received? Yeah, that feeling doesn't go away. I think it's a good feeling.
Yeah, and so kind of in that same kind of ilk, like, what are you struggling with most right now?
Right now, struggling. Let's see. Can I say the election?
You can say anything you want. Yeah.
Yeah, just electing climate leaders, people who are going to care for this planet. Trying to implement some government change, and that's something that we're very passionate about. And yeah, the environment. So that's a big thing right now. And obviously, we're a couple weeks away from Election Day, and hoping that we can, as a community, elect climate leaders that are going to help protect and keep these lands safe, so we can continue to enjoy them, and our children and grandchildren and everyone can enjoy them. So yeah, that's the biggest thing on my mind right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you really enjoy coaching and that you enjoy mentoring that next generation of marketers and creatives. With that in mind, like, what's one piece of advice that you'd give them?
Oh, this is like the letter back to yourself when you're 18 or something like that. Kind of, I always think, or I think about that sometimes. Like, what could I tell myself, or someone starting out? And I would say, you know what? Don't worry about being perfect. Like, don't chase perfection. Just go and do it and try it and figure it out. Don't be too concerned about how you look or let ego get in the way. Just dive in and figure stuff out. There's going to be great moments. There's going to be hard moments. That doesn't change. That just goes with you. But yeah, don't be apprehensive and don't worry about perfection. Just kind of dive in and be okay with it, and don't let your ego rule you.
What's one of your favorite memories of Cory?
Yeah, I was thinking about this driving in today, and there's so many good memories. But I think an awesome one was we were in Aspen for the X Games, and we're watching all the athletes compete, and it's just such a great weekend. You're surrounded by all your industry friends. You're in Aspen, which is awesome just on its own. But it was just hammering snow, and I believe we were supposed to fly out of Aspen to go directly to the SIA trade show in Vegas. And I think the flight got canceled. And then we just quickly made the decision that it just wasn't worth like sitting at the airport, probably get canceled again or whatever. So we just stayed. And that Monday, when pretty much the circus of the X Games cleared out of town, we went to Highlands and hiked Highlands Bowl and had I don't know, it must have been a 2 or 3 foot deep powder day. And it's just that feeling of you just had this great weekend, but it was chaos. And then the next thing we end it with just us hiking the bowl and just smashing some serious pow. And then we got in the rental car, drove straight to Vegas, and checked into the hotel still in our snowboard gear. And I think we ended up getting in like half a day later than we would have. But getting that kind of bonus day with that, sharing it with friends and getting powder like that, I mean, that's really takes it right back to why we all got into this whole thing.
In addition to the question that you asked earlier, is there something else that you've always wanted to know from Cory that maybe there's been like this mystery or this thing outstanding that either professionally or personally you wanted to ask him and know the answer to?
I don't know. There's so much. Luckily, we've had some good time to sit down together. And luckily, a couple of weeks ago, I ended up out in California and got to stop in and spend a night at Cory's new place and kind of, just see the family. I think it's been several years. Everyone was so grown up. His oldest is in college. I mean, it's crazy. The last time I saw them, they were kids. This time they were adults, and just cool to see him settled into the whole new Patagonia thing. But I don't know. I think what's so interesting to me is that he was able to move through a couple different great companies, but those also required international moves with a family. And I think that would probably stop other people from taking on that challenge. And yeah, so I don't know if I had one question, it'd probably be like the mindset of making big decisions like that with a family and trying to figure out what the right move is.
Make sure to visit our website, www.wildstory.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. I like big stories and I cannot lie. You other storytellers can't deny.